Did well, bro. My name is Matt Marilak. Just a quick introduction. I'm as I found out earlier, I'm old looking, but I'm a student. I'm finishing a master's in cultural policy and management at WITS. Other than that, I'm a musician. I play a couple places, but mostly church, and I'm a part of a band called We Worship, and I also teach music at a theatre school part-time. It's called Stageworks in Randburg. So that's sort of me, and it's funny how this all happened. A mutual friend of ours, reached out to me and said, there's this talk, would you like to be a part of it, and you're a facilitator? And I looked at the conversation topic, men and sex, and I immediately, felt that it's something I wanted to be a part of. I think men seldom talk with themselves, let alone with one another, about, at least that's my view, about this topic in particular. And I felt, I wish I had this one, when I was not as old as I am. I'm not old, but I wish I had this platform. So that really informed why I said yes. And in my role as facilitator, I'd like to maintain the integrity of the conversation, whether people have differing views, controversial views, feel free. This is a safe space for that. We wouldn't be having this conversation if we didn't have problematic views about sex as men, period. There just wouldn't be a need for this conversation, I think. So we're having it because there are those views in existence, and we'd like to probe them. So I'd like to invite us all to contribute. We're going to take on the format of really a conversation between the panel and yourselves. And I'll do my best. If you have any questions, do feel free, even in the middle of this discussion, to raise your hand or even shout, it's fine. And I'll note you, and you can say what you feel is necessary or is differing from what the panelists are saying, or even contribute to what they're saying. So I'd like us to embark on this conversation just with an understanding of respect for one another, and just an openness to learn and understand more about this topic. I thank the ladies for coming as well. You're welcome. So feel free as well. I don't want to exclude any voices. This platform is for society, and so your voices are welcome too. So moving ahead, I'd like to give the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. So I'll just start here on my left. Zeph, would you mind introducing yourself? Can you use that mic? Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Zeph Chipoke. I'm with the Alpha project and Nova Health Institute. Alpha project was introduced in 2008 with specific focus on men, especially gay men, bisexuals, and MSMs. So focus in the industry is to give care, conscientize the community, and then to prevent and to treat. So I'm currently a clinical coordinator based in Chawero and Zola. So what we do every day, we see clients and we manage them, especially when it comes to STIs and HIV. I'm currently studying towards my MPH with Medunza, and a qualified nurse from University of Venda. Yes, and thank you for inviting me. Yes.
All right, thank you, sir. Next we have Hamish. Go ahead.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hamish Neal. I am an applied drama practitioner and lecturer based at Wits University with a program called Drama for Life. Alongside that, I'm also a performer. I like doing a lot of physical theatre work, and a lot of that physical theatre work does look at masculinity and the male body and what that means and how it's cultured and how we understand it through culture. And in terms of the applied theatre work that I do with Drama for Life, is I direct our theatre company that is focusing on conducting sexual reproductive health education with youth. But it is a youth-centered and student-centered education program. So the main focus of it is to go in and allow the learners to ask the questions that they want to ask, as opposed to going in with a set message. So we've innovated this model, which is an integration of two current existing models. One out of UCLA's Art and Global Health program, which is known as the AMP model, which is currently moving from the west coast of the States across towards the east coast in various high schools. And then in Johannesburg in particular, we have the Mvuso Communities and Schools project from Drama for Life, which has been running for the last 8 years. And we've taken the benefits and strengths from both of those projects and integrated this new education model known as Unzipped. So we've been going around with that and asking the many youth in and around Gauteng and even in various countries now, Botswana, Swaziland, and in Zimbabwe we're just opening up to now, how young people want to learn about sex and what they want to know about relationships and love and intimacy and or diseases. And that's what I do.
Awesome, thank you, Hamish. And last but not least, Nyaniso. Go ahead, bro.
My name is Nyaniso Ntsikelelo-Zete. I'm an actor, I'm a dancer, and I explore other artistic expressions like singing and directing and choreography. I'm also an emotional clearing practitioner. With my current partner, Yana, I've established a company called Velo Souls, which is a holistic healing based company where we explore all things holistic and healing through art, various art forms like dance and acting. And the practice that we work with is emotional clearing, the spiral, and that is focused at pulling out all of the traumas that people have anchored in their energetic, emotional, physical bodies, and helping them journey through those in the healthiest but quickest, most effective ways. I've been doing that for a while, and that has led me to my journey of healing men and healing myself as a man, and realizing how much of a need for men to heal their emotional and energetic bodies. Something that I feel has been greatly neglected in society, and has informed everything that we touch, from relationships to our professional endeavors, how we fit into society, and our current identity in how this very fast-moving society is. So my reason for being here is to share my thoughts, discoveries through my work and my art, and my own healing journey with what I feel society currently is.
All right, awesome. So that's our panel. Thank you so much to each of you to taking the time to be a part of this conversation. Welcome. And let me just extend one last time a welcome to everybody. So in terms of I guess the topics or subtopics that you'd like to cover, I just wanted to give you or a sort of bird's eye view of what we'd like to cover this time. So we have 5 subtopics. So the first, intimacy and emotion of men and sex. Second, risky behavior, multiple sex partners and cheating. Third, sex, money and power. Fourth, blurred lines going into consensual sex versus non-consensual sex versus rape. And then lastly, rape culture. But I'd like us to develop this conversation as organically as possible. If from the one theme, there's a good segue to something else, we'll do that. So it doesn't have to be in this order. But I just wanted everyone to know what the subtopics that we'd like to cover, so you can think about questions already that you'd like to ask when those come up. So in terms of time, it's now just after 2, 2:05. We'll try and keep it to an hour and a half. So by 22:04, we should be done here. But that's up to us, right? That's up to us. Obviously, feel free if you need to leave in between that's fine. But I just wanted to give you guys the skeleton of what I'm working with and what I'm trying to guide in terms of the conversation. But just to start us off, I think the fundamental sort of debate that underpins all these topics is the very nature of men. And I'd like us to just talk very quickly about the nature of men, speaking specifically to the notion of us being sexual animals, and that being pretty much informing our identity, and just opening a discussion about nature versus nurture. Is that learned? Is it something that biologically we just have? Is it both? Is it none of the above? So I'd just like to open up to the panel that question. Are we as men, like our primary identity as sexual animals, is that something that we learn? Is that something we're born with? Would you like to go first? Go for
Yes. Everything that we are as men, as human beings, is programmed into us by society. Some programming comes by way of direct learning from society, from our parents, from our friends. And some things is inherently passed on to us by energy and behavior. So things that we just pick up on by how a person conducts themselves in society, that this is how you do that thing, just by watching somebody else do it. When it comes to sex and men being sexual beings, I believe that's a programming that's been instilled in men for a long, long time. I'm thinking hundreds of years, because it has become the primary way of accessing safety and vulnerability and expression for men, because all the other forms of expression and vulnerability is something that, without it being articulate, it's so much, but it's something that is known to be not identified with masculinity, with being a man, to talk so much about how you feel, to cry, to all of those other things which sort of inform a lot about our expression. So there's only just a few places that it's become okay and socially accepted that a man can express and feel and be vulnerable, and sex is like at the top of the list, and below that is like other coping mechanisms like expression through like sports expression through exploring or how drugs and alcohol give us that it's okay to feel, and so coming right back up to that sex thing, I just definitely feel like it's one of those crutches that we're given, that it's okay to access those parts of ourselves, those vulnerable expressive parts of ourselves, and thus we because there's so much that we're feeling, there's so much that we've got going on, we sort of pretty much pull it apart in all kinds of directions, this theme of sex as men, just to try and express so many different things. And I feel that's why men end up becoming identified with sex.
Sure. Zeph, I'd like to hear from you, with your nursing background, the flip side of our sexual identity, or identities being sexualized, from the standpoint of it being a nature, it being built in. Imagine a society where, far-fetched as it may sound, where there isn't that pressure, or there isn't that learned behavior. Would it be the same? Would our current reality still be the same if it was strictly our nature? If you could comment on that.
Yeah, I think this topic is very much broad. Because honestly speaking, if it was natural, that it was nature that were, as a man, we were born knowing what we are going to experience in life. It wasn't going to be as much as difficult with what we are experiencing now. Why am I saying that? Is that because sex now, we learn when we're growing up, we tend to learn even bad things. That's why now we've got a lot of sexual I'm sorry, it's my first time in a panel of discussion like this. I'm used to presentation, so I'm just going forward, but
it's a safe space.
So it's my first, and I thank Zokolo for inviting me. But sex, as its own, I'm failing. So I'll catch up.
Get back to you.
Yes, it's true.
Okay, no problem.
I'm so afraid.
Don't worry, you're doing well so far. I think, just to add on to what's being offered, I think I agree with the sentiment that everything that we, men, society says about men, sex, intimacy, is constructed, is social. And I think that there's often a very dangerous collapsing or piggybacking along these lines of biology and nature that I don't think are healthy, and I don't think are even accountable in many instances. It's often used as an excuse because it is present. So I think almost everybody, every body, not every individual and every identity, but almost every physical body has the capacity to or the ability to perform functions that can reproduce, and we have called that sex. And but that sex, that word sex, we have also attached to other things and have loaded with other things. So in one respect, as Zeph was saying, yes, if it was just a natural thing and we were just witnessing the act of intercourse, of reproduction, and and maybe even as functional as that, as reproduction, not even adding any kind of relational quality to it, then maybe it would be something that is quite neutral, is simply just like breathing, and we move on from it. But because there is the complexity of identity formation, and this is connecting to what Nyani is saying about how culture and society shapes, gives meaning, defines, tries to understand, it isn't just that. And so to close with, I think statements like that for me are normally very dangerous, because it's taking something that is present in a natural, very mechanical in a way situation, and trying to make it seem as though the social and social intricacies are somehow just there because of that, instead of the other way around. And that's something that I think that we don't often get to. And it's used a lot by many individuals and many circumstances. We take something that is present, and when I say real, I don't mean that it is more right or more accurate, but just is. And then because of that, we piggyback stuff on it to validate, and then therefore it's like, well, you can't deny that people are having sex, and no one's denying that, but there's something else about sex that you're not naming, and you're just piggybacking with. So that's what I'd offer as an initial response to that men are just sexual animals, I think was a statement.
Yes.
And I don't know if this is the nature of this conversation, but I'd say I strongly disagree with that statement, because it's so dangerously ambiguous. There's no accountability in it.
Absolutely. I think that argument in many ways, like as it is, as ambiguous as it is, can sometimes be used as an excuse for behavior that hurt men and hurt others, because we're sort of slaves to it, and then that's the sentiment that statement holds, if believed as is, that we cannot control and we cannot change meaning about it. And I think as and when it does change meaning, our men's relationship with it, and I think it just being animalistic or placed in that way, that's just my view as well. Like, it just makes it seem as if it's uncontrollable and needs to be satisfied in some way, which leads into other issues. But let's segue into the first topic, and you touched on it, so about intimacy, vulnerability. Sorry, that's fine. So we men, the belief is that men aren't emotional beings. Largely, that's the belief, or at the very least, we struggle to communicate emotion outside of sex. For instance, you mentioned that sex is one of the acts or expressions of vulnerability, emotion. But for a second, could we just step outside of the act and just engage this question of, are we out of touch with our emotions? And are we expressing it healthily outside of our sexual identity? That's my question. Would you like to respond?
I think men are deeply in touch with their emotions. No man is out of touch with their emotions. It's just that it's the restrained forms that we have of expression that has become the veil between men and society in relation to how we get to express ourselves. And the veil is all those things that I named that are like sort of little crutches and the means that society says, okay, you can feel that feeling through this, that. I understand that from a man. And when it comes to sex, like I've come through these patterns, and I know I'm not the only one. When you're in a bad mood and like yeah, it must be a need for sex, so you're getting laid enough. When I'm hungry, when I'm sad, when I'm angry, when I'm feeling all these things, like the equation is always like, yeah, let me just go get some sex and I'll be fine. Let me just go smoke a blunt and I'll be cool. Let me go hit a double jack and I'll be fine. Let me go watch a game of Arsenal versus Manchester and I'll be chilled. Yeah, this is good, because you know what? Like when he's in that moment, that's when you see a man go, yes, it's a goal. Yeah, and like and in that, it's not even actually, from my perception, it's not even about the goal. It's about like all the other things that he's angry about, all the other things that he just needed to cry about or just feel through, and like he will feel through that thing. And that's why I believe that sport has become so integral to a man's culture, and in the like sort of the general like perception and this representation of what you see of a man. Like women almost understand that, hey, when it's him and his boys in soccer, I can't even talk to him, because actually he is integrally like giving himself that space to do so much through that game. And that's the same thing when it comes to like sex and all the other permutations of sex. And I feel like we're given like that, and so we try and filter everything that we're feeling through that thing called sex. I feel like men are very, 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 very in touch with their emotions, and they're very in need of expressing those emotions.
Sure, we've got a member of the audience that would like to contribute. Would you mind just introducing your name, your name, and then yeah, go ahead.
Hello. I am Yana. For people, yeah, transparency. Nelis is my partner, but it's a question to this discussion, to this conversation. What I'm interested in, following on from that exertion and that expression and that utilizing of the goal or the blunt or sex or whatever it is that we're using as a coping mechanism, when we see men that are utilizing those expressions but without an awareness of what they're expressing, can we still call that being in touch with the emotion? So if we don't know that the goal is expressing the anger from home, if it's a pattern, a habitual pattern that's being played out without awareness, where does the being in touch come in?
Hamish, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, and
thank you for your contribution. Yeah.
So I think it's a really pertinent question, because for me, what it speaks back to is something that I'm trying to remember the name, but Professor Vivian Spicer was sharing, and what was so enlightening about what she shared. She is a drama therapist by profession, has been for the past 40 years, and she was speaking about how individuals, any individual, regardless of gender and nationhood and so on and so forth, the process of internal healing and processing that is required. And one of the points that she articulated was around that, was around that exact point of the need for the internal dialogue, and I'm paraphrasing quite poorly here, but that internal dialogue with what is happening. In a way, I would say it is still being in touch with one's emotions, because of the nature of how it's been framed in terms of what we're directly responding to. I get and sort of strongly align with that sense that it is a strong being in touch with, because there is an actual feeling that is happening. I think the way it's been presented today, just as an initial trigger, is that there's a sort of dulling, a numbness to them. And so for me, that being in touch speaks to the live, present feeling that is there. And I mean, I think of just last night, a very good friend of mine who put up a Facebook post, and it's one of the most painful things I've ever read. So he says, to be blessed with anxiety, self-loathing, and he listed 2 other things about his self-hate. And then he says, thanks God for a great life. And now it kind of demonstrates like the fact that like we feel it, shame, guilt, the fact that in society as men we're meant to be in competition always, and every little thing becomes that in one way or another. So we're feeling. So I think we are in touch, but I think what we aren't doing is exactly what you're saying. There's very, very few times where the processing, the engaging with, the internal dialogue, it's very base, maybe. I don't know if that's fair to say, but it's very primitive in some respects. Hence the drawing back to animal, and I'm saying that again, noting that that's how society kind of lets us off the hook as men. It's just like, whoa, be careful, your father's feeling is very tired today. Like the rest, and that was something growing up, like I was used to hearing, your father is tired, just like give him his space. And in one respect, you grew up thinking, oh yeah, okay, I'm being respectful to elders and whatnot. And to an extent, I think anyone is entitled to their own space, yes. But never was it a case of, hey, well, and I don't know, I wasn't privy to those conversations with my parents, but never did I ever hear my father being challenged to say, okay, I get that you're tired, you're saying tired, it might be something else. We're labeling it as tired. You've had a long day at work, but we're not actually engaging with what is going on, and also the fact that you have children who need that connection from their father. It's a blessing that you're here, but they need that connection from you. Can you avail yourself? Can you go, whew, okay, that was that, that was work, but these are my kids, and I need to do some work, and that's what we don't do. I need to do some work to meet them. It's normally just entitled man. Oh, I'm tired. Hey, and your son is making noise. Can you come? I told you I'm tired. There's no internal conversation. And I'm being very, very stereotypical and very broad, intentionally, just as we get into it. So I think that's where I see the sort of marrying of those 2 thoughts. And I don't know if that, I don't know what that is. That's just how I see it.
Yeah, okay, awesome, thank you. Would you like to weigh in? Is it?
Yeah. Okay, I'm back now. Oh, okay. Yeah. Going through the topic of men, intimacy and emotions. I just wanted to touch it before you came in. Why today I wanted to touch it is that men can't be intimate without emotions. But the fact of the matter is that we try so much to want to hide our emotions. But inside, we are emotionless men. We can try by all means to hide it. But the fact of the matter remains that we can't be intimate without emotions. Be it sexually. I know most of us will go out to say, I want to keep something out of me. Maybe I just want to walk up in the street. I just want to get to a one night stand. Just want to, even that one night stand, there are emotions involved in what is happening. So actually, sex, broadly, there's a lot of emotions in us as men. So we think a lot about it, but we emotionally don't want to expose it outside. Yes.
Interesting. What I'm picking up, and do correct me if I'm wrong, is that yes, we're in touch with our emotions, but perhaps the disjunct is not knowing how to communicate that outside of sexual expression, or at least we use sexual expression. We employ sexual expression or our sexuality to communicate emotion. Now, I think the question is, how healthy is that? Because I think on the question of intimacy, I think it's I don't think it's a full conversation or the full understanding of what intimacy is if it's just equaling sex. Surely there's conversations and opening one up that needs to take place or is equal to that sex itself, or perhaps even more valuable than sex. Is the disjunct we struggle to communicate? We're in touch with our emotions. I think what I'm hearing from the panel is that is what's happening. We know how we feel, but I think we need to remember that whether a man identifies as heterosexual or otherwise, sex involves another person. So if we want to use that to communicate a particular feeling, should the person not know? Then why are we doing this? And I think maybe the bigger question there is how we employ sex. My contribution is this. There's things we do for pleasure, and there's things we do to numb pain. And it might be the same act, sex in this case. But what I'm hearing is, I'm not hearing the pleasure side. I'm hearing that we've got a lot to deal with. And we use sex to cope, really, with our daily challenges as men. So on some level, I'd like us to unpack what those challenges are. And perhaps put this question forward. Are we failing the people that we are having sex with by not communicating our emotions outside of the actual act? Do we know how to do that? Hamish? Did I go too deep? I'm sorry.
No, I think.
What do you think? Are you tracking with me? Is everyone tracking with me?
And I think it's good. It's good to have that depth, because otherwise we're saying all the nice things that we want to hear, so that on the panel, it's different. Let's go there. So I appreciate that depth. As I'm still processing that response, where I grabbed the mic was on your statement around intimacy and then the processing of emotion. And I think I might backtrack a little bit and then hopefully launch into a response. I think one of the main things, and as a man, and I speak about myself not because I am right, not because I'm the best example thereof, but only because I can speak for my experience and my reality. And I'm open to that being critiqued. But that's just to hopefully frame to the group why I speak in that way. But I think for me, intimacy is something that I had the privilege of experiencing and learning as modeled in the home that I was in, and as a result, the sort of bridging from intimacy into, or intimacy within a sexual relationship is something that I perhaps had a little bit more of a vocabulary to work with. But even so, it wasn't like my parents taught me that.
Sure.
So I think sometimes, often as men, what we do is we collapse intimacy with the act of sex. Hence what Nyani was saying about how we actually process, and I think what also Zeph was saying about how We can't ever get away from the fact that sex is emotional, you know. But as men, even before we get to sex, there's sometimes a great challenge we have with intimacy. And intimacy with ourselves, intimacy with one another. Thinking of an example, I know in Ireland there was a program that they launched, I believe it was in Ireland, where they were trying to get men to talk. So they had, I think they called them men's clubs, and they had things like tractor fixing, you know, and carpentry. And then what they would do is they would have like these older men who were like expert, you know, carpenters and whatnot, and then in their shed, you know, when they're like, you know, planing the wood, you know, somebody would say something like, oh, I'm having problems getting my erection up, you know, and so like what they were saying is they initiated this because they realized that, okay, there's a desperate need for men to start to speak their emotions, and that unfortunately in a sort of heterosexual relationship, and I don't just mean in terms of love or even desire perhaps, just where you have the two different genders, regardless of one's own orientation, there seemed to be some kind of communication break, and that's societal. And so what they had identified here is they said, we need to get the men to start to speak to each other, and the only way they're doing this, as I said, is through the sport, through carpentry, you know, through them at the bar, you know. And for me, that before the act of sex, that's where there's an issue. Is like why as men can't we be intimate with one another? And even and I'm saying it to myself, going when I say that, I think I don't want to touch another man. And it's like, thank you, I'm learning. but even that, you know, like why do we equate intimacy with physicality? You know, goes back to your point. Why? Where's that internal conversation? And so then to that question then of me, and it's a very pertinent question, should we speak to our partners? It's making me think whether I have done that with my partner. Have I actually communicated that, you know what, I'm actually just feeling sad today and I just want to have sex to numb the pain? I can honestly say there have been times in my life where that has happened. Like just now, thinking about it, that's happened. And is that right of me? Do I have that, like, you know, my partner says I'm here to comfort you, but should I say, hey, I'm feeling sad today, can we have sex? Like, is it wrong? Is it wrong to actually say that? You know?
Can I put a question out to the ladies?
And men.
And men. Can I put a question out?
Because no one knows who I'm having sex with, so...
Absolutely. Apologies for that. Can I put a question out? You know, I'm a firm believer in and I'm learning myself, to be loved is to be known. Like, and just making that that link. And then the question is, what does it mean to be known? And I think deep down, I think men want to be known, but we don't know. As you said, you know, even in an environment where you had both parents, you know, and I think we need to recognize that that's not the case for everybody. You weren't taught intimacy or to even ask for it outside of the act, you know, because boys will be boys. So my question that I'd like to put out is would you appreciate that level of vulnerability of knowing what's really happening in your partner's life? or is it just about sex for you? And you wanting to... Are you walking out?
With the mic.
With the mic. It's too much. It's too heavy. I can't do this. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Larato.
Hi, Larato.
I actually have a partner who is a man who is incredibly vulnerable and emotional, and I find that very masculine.
Okay, interesting.
Obviously, I had to reach a level of femininity in myself to understand that, you know, there's a difference between that. And it is the most healthiest relationship I have ever been in, because if he is able to tell me how he feels, and for example, I feel sad, I want to have sex now. It's totally allowed. I said, I'm not the solution here right now. But that level of vulnerability, I feel, is exactly what creates the bond that we have. One of the things I know for sure, just because of experience, is that without vulnerability there is no trust. And if you are going to claim that you trust someone, but you are unable to tell them how you feel, then you are building a house of cards. And I find this topic very interesting, because for a long time I used to think, men shouldn't cry, and men shouldn't do this, and men shouldn't do that. So even we as women, or at least I will take responsibility. I, as a woman, also came up with an idea of how men should be.
Interesting.
And I think that also creates pressure, you know. And when meeting a man who is completely in his manhood and comfortable and grounded as a man to say, I'm hurt, there's definitely a strength in that that's incredibly sexy.
Interesting. Any other contributions? I saw that hand. Are you sure? You don't want to say anything? Okay, yes?
I'd like to.
Anyone else? Just so I note, anyone else who wants to speak from the audience? Okay, go ahead.
Hey, weaving back into what Hamish touched upon, which is the expectancy. That I'm tired, so I have the right to have my space. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that the word that's coming to mind right now is self-righteousness, but that expectancy. And I think that it's important when having these conversations where we're opening up vulnerability and expression of emotions and what's going on, that we understand that that doesn't then mean that the person receiving is expected to behave in any particular way. So coming back to the original question, I feel like a lot of the time my body knows, and I won't allow anyone into my body without my body opening up and my body's consent. My body won't allow anything which is dishonor into my system, and that's a journey that I've been on within myself, of cultivating a depth and a connection to my own body, my own intuition, my own femininity. That's my personal journey, and part of that is honoring where other people are at, but honoring myself first as a woman. So I think it's important for my man and the men around me to communicate themselves, yes, of course, but let's not get that entitlement wrapped up into that expression. So I am expressing myself does not mean I am entitled to a particular response.
Interesting. No other contributions for now? I'd like to tie in some themes here from the two ladies that spoke. The one of as growing up, you learned what, or women learn how men ought to behave, and then you touched on entitlement, and I think that's prevalent in how masculinity perhaps isn't defined, but there's a reality of that being a part of what it means to be a man in our society, or how we identify that being masculine is my dad saying, I'm not willing to do anything right now, I just want to, so we make those links. So my question is, sure, maybe this goes back to the very beginning. This is the conversation we're having, but how do we learn how to do this thing. And in a family setting, I guess, where those formative years are spent, however you know the setup is, are we truly getting everything we need in understanding masculinity? Because I think we can all agree that a masculinity that is defined by you know, complete lack of communication, a man that doesn't cry, for instance, or that being associated with weakness, isn't in truth anything outside of masculinity. In many ways, being in touch with those emotions and expressing them in that way can be interpreted as sexy. So where do we learn how to be men? Like, and if it's not in the family context, where? You know, what is it that we're viewing? What is it? And perhaps we can bring pornography into this conversation at this point, where the act itself is where we learn how to do this thing. You know, because that's not necessarily spoken about at home. I know that wasn't the case for me. So we learn, you know, Friday action night, you know, and you know, that guy's voice comes on. What's that? Oh, sorry, I'm like, is that God?
Still remember Emmanuel.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have under 18s in the room, dude. No, okay, great. You know, Friday action nights, you know, just after Lotto, you know? Just after Lotto, you know, there you are, young, impressionable, because things are happening to you physically, and mom and dad aren't really talking to you about this. And I think, you know, perhaps we can even bring in culture into how we learn to be masculine. Yeah, and there's lots of elements to this, but I'd like us to engage these things in the conversation at this point. Would you like to? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I think the primary learning point, with my experience, is that in Mvenda, in culture. So there's no way that you will be taught how to be a man or how to be at home. I went to initiation school when I was 8. So, and when I came out of initiation school, I was told that I was a man already. So because we go while we are still very young. So I think that in itself, the community, the society and the culture which you practice is the one which defines how you behave. And you are told not all those sort of things while you are 8 years old, while you are being cut, and you are told that this is how a man behaves, and now you are a man. And it goes to effect that you want to experiment what you were taught while at the young age. When I was doing my grade 7 already, I was no longer a virgin. Why? Because I was a man from 8 years old. So I think a culture plays a lot of role in this. And then another thing which I wasn't to talk about is the issue of emotions. Are we really failing our partners by not sharing our emotions? And I still believe that yes. The reason why a lot of clinics outside here now, they're making a lot of killings. I mean, men's clinics and what? It's because we're not sharing our emotions. I'm very emotional or I'm stressed from work. I can't share with my partner. And I'm expecting to go and be intimate. And when it doesn't wake up, because I'm so stressed, I feel that I'm cursed or something is wrong. But if we were sharing our emotions, my partner will understand, we will both understand, and then life goes on. But now, because we men are so reserved to not want to share our emotions, this is what is happening. Yes. So I feel like, really, if men were sharing emotional emotions, there was not going to be a lot of problems in relationships and men vis-a-vis sex. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Let me process further.
All right, no problem. Would you like to?
Just quickly, yeah. So on the thing of when we learn to be men and whatnot, I think, yeah, it's really complex because there is attitude, there is behavior, there are actions, and it's like, again, like how we started off. It's just learn to be a man. Like how? So and it's so culturally specific as well. So in my culture, I am Bemba. Like I identify. Well, I have two cultures that I identify to. So I am Bemba, and I'm the MacNeil of Bara clan from Scotland. So I have both in Ush Bemba, and in both of those cultures, there are distinct practices that qualify you into manhood. So in our Bemba culture, you have to be able to build a straw hut. You have to make your first kill, bring it home, make the fire, cook it, and so on and so forth. Once you've done that, you can get married. Wow. In our Scottish culture, the kilt, the time that you get your kilt, the wearing of the kilt, not so much, but kind of in my nuclear and then just beyond our nuclear family, that's become a measure of manhood. For us is the time you get your kilt, what that signifies, the wearing of that, particularly because in a more globalized society, and obviously the Scottish is more Western, men wear pants, so to wear the skirt, the kilt is, so it's all these layered things, but in amongst all of that, you have something like becoming sexually mature. Now, there is a biological fact that is present there. The body, as you mentioned, like the body is physically changing. There's certain hormones that are being, there's certain physical attributes that are, and then that is then attached to this cultural narrative. So you have to build your hut, and there's an erection. Let's just put them together. There's no conversation around what each of them might mean, how to start to articulate, and I think Nyani was speaking about it earlier, this idea of being able to articulate this stuff. It's all just clumped together, become a man. But now, okay, so Nyani can build a better hut than me, but now in that same conversation is this thing about the use of that erect penis. And because that's not spoken about, I'm going, so does that mean he can also use his penis better than me? Because it's not spoken about, but it's put under the same bracket. And then because it's never spoken about, I just sit with that wonder. And then what can Nyani and I do together? We can watch porn together, as an example, or maybe not even porn. We can watch some action film because there's strength, there's prowess there, and then that same character is going and having sex. And I think it's because there are gaps in the learnings that our cultures offer. And look, I think a lot of our cultures need to be critiqued. I identify culturally, so I do respect and it gives me a form of identity. So I'm not one to throw out culture, but I think there is a need to critique and maybe add conversations and maybe add also perspectives that can help broaden and strengthen those cultures. Because I don't think it's all wrong, but maybe it just needs to be updated. And then also include some stuff that is very present now, like you can't get away from it anymore. It's in our faces.
Right. Yes? Oh, okay.
Referring to culture, I identify as Xhosa. I went to initiation school, and coming out of initiation, there is so much pressure for you to live up to a certain identity of an ideal form of manhood. And at most times, in Xhosa, you are told as a man, you don't speak, it's a woman thing to speak, and you speak only in the crowd. Sure. So at any time that you voice your emotions in outside the customs of practicing your culture, it's frowned upon as a man, because talking is a woman thing. And I think that's where It's in those spaces and how we socialize in our cultural forms that it becomes problematic. Because I grew up as a very sensitive, very open, emotionally open young man. From an early age, I would voice out my emotions. I was intrinsically aligned and informed by my emotions. And any time I would actually speak out about my emotions, I would be looked down upon or perceived to be weak or less than, or seemingly utilized by society against me as a weak form of a man. And which in principle right now, I find that there is so much strength. In actual fact, I've become a better man than what society has deemed of what is this ideal man that we are deconstructing right now. So culture is complicitly and a role player in terms of creating this problem that we are as men, that we don't speak, we don't know how to identify with our emotions, we don't know how to express our emotions, even though we are emotional beings. Going back to men don't speak. You don't speak unless it speaks to the duty of you being a man.
Thank you for that. Yes, Nelson. You've processed.
I've been processing so many things that I wish to touch upon. I'll try and briefly do that. Weakness as a man is something that is one of the most deeply feared things, because we have been given the identity of strength at birth. And whenever a man or boy embodies anything that is not strength, it is perceived to be weakness. And because of that identity of strength, it means that everything that revolves around you being a man is hindered with this weight of being strong. And I sort of spoke about this backwards, but that's why there has been all of these barriers, all of these filters, these veils for which men must now find ways to express themselves, because like Mzo's just said, talking is associated to weakness. Expression is weakness, vulnerability is weakness, and feeling is weakness. And that is not just even a Xhosa thing, it is a universal man language that has been, programmed into us. And thus all of these structures were created for which men can only then speak, only then can you. And I found this around the world. Coming back to the question that was asked earlier about is it healthy to process everything that we feel through these so-called systems, bridges, veils? No, it's not healthy, because it leads to unconscious expressions, whether we like it or not. We're always feeling and we're always processing things as human beings, and then as men, which is innately as men, we're always feeling. So whether we like it or not, what we feel needs to be expressed and will be expressed. So when we're not consciously present with how those things are going to be expressed, then it can be expressed and come out in any form under the sun. Rape, abuse, violence, all kinds of abuse, emotional or physical abuse, verbal abuse, all of those things. but also the pretty ways of expression also like fall under that under the sun.
Why did you use the word pretty?
Pretty is in like, you know, like all of a sudden he just buys you flowers because he just really wanted you to feel that he's a loving man, so he buys you flowers out of the blue, like, you know, he takes you on a honeymoon thing, and a lot of the time when it's unconscious, it's not coming from a place of actually I'm in a wholesome, grounded place, and here I would love us to go on a holiday and let's go. He's coming from a place of fulfilling an expression of going, God, I'm a man. I take my woman on holidays. I buy her flowers. I do, and he's trying to fulfill some internal, unexpressed, uncognitively consolidated. Journey, pressure, feeling that he's going through. So the best thing that any man could ever do for himself, or which is something that is so unfamiliar, is just to speak directly to what's going on, why it's going on, where it comes from, and therefore where I'm currently at is I'd love to have sex about it. You know, as an example. Sometimes you might like go, I want to go fight about it, and that's just how I'm feeling. And a lot of the time you'd find that a man just having just said that, it diffuses so much and has and not totally healed but addressed so much. And I find that like after I've just expressed that, you know what, I had like a really challenging day at work. Hamish talked to me like this, and then such and such straight after that, and then the boss said this and that, and then I'm feeling like I'm really like a useless person at work, and so I just came home thinking that I just really want to have sex, and by the time I've concluded that thought process, it's an exhalation. Oh, fuck, okay, that's what's been going on. Do you still want to have sex? No, not actually. I processed that, and I felt it out, and now I understand what it is. And I feel like all I need to do is just address Hamish in this way, ask my boss not to do that, and whatever. And yeah, the healthiest thing is just going to the root and speaking unto it, and that is I think where the how is a question mark for all of us. How do you then go directly to the root and speak unto what you're feeling? Like, it sounds like it's a solution all in itself, but it actually, I've realized upon my own journey that it takes a process of my own, from an emotional to the expression to the thought process, to get to a place where I can directly speak to what I've got going on. And I've only recently been doing that, maybe for the past month, and I've noticed what a great difference and an impact it makes in my life. And I can't give any man a how, because it's personal to you and personal to the journey that you've come from and that you are currently at. Yeah, that's what I want to say.
Sure.
Sorry, which is just one of the things that Nyai's sharing now has triggered me to is how, as a man, I used to hate like the follow-up question. And it's just making me think about that internal processing, and like something landed as he was talking. So my partner's done a great job with me, like show real patience to sort of say, okay, so what's happening? What are you feeling? You know, and I've got to the place now where I'm naming, and it's interesting because being an actor, you know, you're supposedly very in touch with your emotions and this and the other thing. But it's actually, you're using it in a particular context. It's a guise. It's not genuine all the time, you know? And so at home, when you're not the character, you have to like say what's happening. And I used to get so annoyed. You know, I'd walk in and be like, man, it's been a really hard day today. I'm just feeling so emotionally drained. And for me, I'm like, yeah, said something. And that, oh really? So what was it about? It used to drive me crazy, and it was so eye-opening, because I would often go to my older brother and be like, yo man, like, you know, I was speaking to her and she just, you know, she just nagging me, like I don't know what's going on, like I'm expressing my emotions, and thank you. And it's so interesting to realize how it is such a big thing for us to learn as men, to like ask the next question and the next question and the next question to get to the root, because we have been so globally, culturally, so deficient in it for so long that just that first step feels like the answer, and it's like, no, you just did the one click on the zip. Like people who've done it for long are used to hearing zip, but it's actually a lot of little clicks going tick, 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 and the closer they get together, it sounds zip. So for us, we go click and we think, yeah, it's there. It's like, no, there's a whole journey to go through. So that was just one thing, and then just really quick on this notion of vulnerability, weakness, and then the language we use to police. So when I was very young, I used to love like getting into costume and whatnot, and the sort of policing statement that came up was gay, you know. Hey, be careful, you know, Hamish likes being in costumes. Eh? And how non-conforming to what is right in society identities are even used as warnings, you know. So I was taught to fear gayness,
Right.
but it's like, wait, this is just a kid who likes getting in costume. Like, what does that actually mean?
Why is it codified that?
Yeah, exactly. And the costumes were things like pirates, because they'd watch TV, see pirate, want to be a pirate. Watch TV, see Captain Planet, want to be Captain Planet. It would, but just to like police it, because, you know, hey, you know, he's very free. Huh? Maybe he's gonna be gay, and it's like now when I think about it, I'm like, how like what? Well, I mean, I get how the links are made, but it's like, how violent is that to threaten a child with gayness because you're living, you know? And so then what you learn is I have to police myself, I have to watch myself, but then also I have to watch out for that, because, so again, on this idea of what do we learn, how are we taught? And it comes out in these statements, and as a child you know. Like as a child, no one has to sit with a child and do this sociology lesson. You know, you're like, that word.
So interesting. I think you know, the conversation at this point, I think there needs to be, well, first off, I think the awareness that's displayed here is amazing, and I think we need to recognize that. But at the same breath, you know, I think there's a privilege that we need to recognize too. That awareness doesn't abound, you know, and then we get challenges of you mentioned rape, you mentioned a behavior that is damaging. Perhaps men don't view it as damaging towards themselves because there's an entitlement there and a self-righteousness there, but it's damaging in as far as our partners. And just this act, it really makes this act distasteful, particularly for victims of violence in this way. And I think we need to recognize that this awareness. I mean, I'm also on a journey myself with emotion, and as you said, you know, I think men don't learn how to open up and communicate what's happening. They're in touch, but there's a lack of communication and learning how to communicate, because really there isn't an incentive to communicate. Perhaps even for yourself, because of the associations with weakness, etc. That culture codes on us. So let's talk about this need still growing up of still trying to find out how the sex thing works. And sorry to go back to Friday Action Night, but you know, I think pornography is is really, particularly for men, a first encounter of what intimacy, at least sexual intimacy, looks like. And I think there's an effect, good and bad, that takes place when even the act of watching pornography is codified and is done in secret. I certainly did that myself growing up. It was, if you'll allow me to be a bit vulnerable, it wasn't something, because there's a natural curiosity I experienced. It wasn't allowed to be spoken about as a child, and I think I'm yet to have a conversation with my dad, actually, and I don't think he wants to. but then that makes me think, well, how else was I supposed to learn this thing, like physically, like the logistics of it, like how am I supposed to? But then let's talk about what we're actually consuming and what's actually being viewed, and is that realistic? And then you have issues of, man, that guy's dick is really like I don't have that, like, and then you have performance anxiety, and then which this now adds a whole lot of complication to you exploring. Am I speaking sense? You would like to come in?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, good afternoon everyone.
Yes.
My name is Adrian. And I think listening to the conversation, what's come up, especially when you speak about this veil, and you're making comparisons visually. So also what I want to touch on is visual culture as well, and the problems that come with visual culture, especially mass culture as well, and what we're consuming on a daily basis that informs our interactions with others. And I think all of us are kind of consuming these images on a daily basis, but we're not really aware of the interactions that's taking place and the interactions that are kind of sitting in our subconscious. And we're not really thinking about how we respond to certain situations based on visual culture and what it's teaching us, directly and also indirectly. So yeah, I think it's also something that is important to deconstruct. Going forward as men, what are we showing younger men in terms of visual culture, and what are they seeing that informs their relationships with other men, other women? Yeah.
Absolutely. Did you? Oh, okay. Would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I just wanted to put flesh on what you were saying. When it comes to visual, we grew up, the older men and our boys, we learned from them after coming back from initiation. We'll follow them when they're going to the bushes with their girlfriend, and then we'll climb trees and want to see what they're doing when they're busy engaging sexually. So that's how we saw how to engage sexually, because we were copying from them while we will follow them and hide and see what they're doing in the bushes. Because culturally, when you're still young, a boy or a teenager, you're not allowed to bring a girlfriend in the house. So they'll go and do it in the bushes. In the bushes, we're still young, we'll follow and watch everything. Then we were learning how it's done. So it's true that we have to be conscious on what we're showing to the younger generation, to the younger men, because whatever we're showing is going to reflect on what has been happening. So it's very important. Yes.
Let's imagine for a moment that. Oh, so did you want to contribute? Like, I'm just thinking now about the images. The images is that women are just like waiting, like that they're just hot and ready, and and you have to perform. But and that's, I mean, my case years before things actually happen for you. But like that's the like pathologically, if I can put it that way, what you're trained in. And I think that's where the entitlement, beyond the cultural, what's taught culturally and what men are taught culturally, I think the images very much, they validate and further embed this culture of entitlement. And the images that we, as I said, are very sexualized I sometimes imagine what it would mean to look at a scene where like, okay, there's consent, like established, like, because I don't, like, that wasn't, that's not something you're taught, established consent. Because if you're watching pornography, like the first scene is this girl is like, she's ready, but there's no setting, like, at least realistically, of what that exchange looks like. And I think women, or partners in general, also, because there's a natural desire, or a desire, if that's what's happening, that it's this very little this conversation that happens. It just happens, and I think then we get into issues of consensual sex versus rape versus these blurred situations, because this consent wasn't verbally established, and because of the images we're getting, it's obviously, what did you expect to happen? Like taking you out for coffee wasn't coffee. It was never coffee. What was actually happening in my mind is taking you home, but that's not communicated. And then we are home, and then this happens. Can we talk a little bit about these blurred lines? and how entitlement employs sex and how and that whole situation. Yes.
I don't think it's entitlement.
Okay.
When we watch movies, I remember as a child watching Emmanuel 2000 Volume 2.
It wasn't the second millennium.
There's 4. Anyway, I remember my intention was looking for, like, how to please a woman, how to be sexy, how to turn a woman on, and all those good things. My intentions were there. And when I watched those movies, I don't remember any sexy scene where a guy went, "Can I kiss you? Can I touch you? Can I enter you?" Like, that's not communicated as a sexy thing. And that not only stayed with the men, I remember very well that, I think I was in high school or something, that a girl was communicating some encounter she was having with some guy, and she said, like, and then he asks, "Can I kiss you?" Like, just do it. Those are the things that we're socially programmed as. It's like, it's unsexy to be the timid man who asks for permission. And that's what it's viewed as. It's viewed as timid, it's viewed as weak, it's viewed as unmasculine and wild and warrior-like and unstrong. And a woman wants a man that can just take it. Those are the things that we're taught. And at the same time, because that's what a woman wants, that's what a man wants to be. To just take it, just pin her against the wall, just ravish her. And then he just ravished me. We've all read those, okay, maybe I read a few of those novels. And I think it's for me and my experience, I still haven't come across a thing of I'm lying. There's been a small version of it where like it totally was, okay, nah, this is entitlement. Like, she's my woman, I'm married to her, she's my girlfriend, she must when I get home, or whatever. There is that, it exists. But like generally, more predominantly, I have an experience of men who just want to be those warriors, those dependable, strong, powerful men that a woman wants to be with. And to be sexy and to be those things that are attractive to a woman, that a woman can feel safe in his presence. And contrary to that desire, it's in line with, just ravish him. And it's that as a programming that I've come across. And now I'm coming to a place of learning that women often feel unsafe when a man doesn't ask, doesn't tell her, doesn't say, hey, can I take you to my place? Is it okay? Can we just? And it's I'm 31 now, and it's a big thing to be learning now. Like, I must unlearn 20 years of like programming of going, this is how you become an attractive man, a desirable man. And I think it can be a bit naive and unfair to impose that all men or men are just entitled and they just feel like, we just can take you whenever. And I'd love to bring women, society, men themselves, the men that are those things, the men that want to be those things, the men that have experienced those things, to bring themselves to that conscious understanding of actually it comes from more than just being the so-called predator who's entitled.
I think the one thing I've been really interested in is on this thing of entitlement and consent and blurred lines is also the beliefs held around the orgasm and being done and finishing. And I think working with teenagers in particular and looking back at my own life is something that I've never actually really addressed until right now. That actually, as a man, I kind of expect to have an orgasm. Like it's so normalized in my societal learnings that I don't ever question it. And to an extent, what I've done in my life is made what I feel is the right choice, and said, I'm going to make sure that my partner also has an orgasm. That way it's fair and equitable. But never have I ever thought, why must you have an orgasm? Like why? It's just a physical process. It actually is. Yeah, it's nice. It's a really nice physical process, but so is sneezing. Like so
You just compare sex to sneezing?
Yes. No.
Do you know that?
No. And this is it. Not sex. The orgasm. I'm comparing the orgasm to sneezing.
Okay.
I'm comparing the orgasm to the release you feel after really needing to pee and then peeing and just that release. I'm not comparing it to sex, and that's something that I've had to really fight to understand, very recently in my life, is actually sex is not the orgasm. But I think, for me anyway, I don't know about other guys, and I'm starting to speak to other men about it, for other guys I think we think sex is the orgasm. Because I mean, like that's what it is. Like even when I think about my engagements with pornography and whatnot, I mean, so okay, very recently I met a friend whose father was actually a porn star. He's actually in the Porn Star Hall of Fame. And yes, yes. And it's been so fascinating sort of engaging with him because it's challenged a lot of my perceptions around pornography and the character that we as society place on the male figure in pornography. His father is a loving, he's a great dad. If he didn't tell you that he was a porn star, you would not think it, right? But one of the things that comes up is this idea that, you know, in porn, like the male and female figures can't have climax, can't experience climax. Why? Because it's the audience member. The audience member is typically using that to experience their own climax.
Sure.
And so, as a young man, that's what I learned from pornography. The moment that got me sexually aroused resulted in that. And it became a simple equation that I taught myself. If I'm starting to feel sexual arousal, I either masturbate, or if I'm in that kind of relationship, because that's a choice I made for myself, I with my partner engage, and it will result in that. And it was like normalized. And never did I think, wait, could I have an intimate engagement that is very physical that doesn't result in an orgasm? And it's something that's this is very new in my life. And I don't like it, but I'm asking myself it because I'm like why actually? Like I believe it so strongly. How? Why? From where?
Interesting.